Hello, I wanted to talk a little bit about China today. There are a number of things to talk about. Again, it's a huge country, it's a huge culture. I keep saying that. I'm sorry, but the world is a big place and this is world music. One of the things that's important to bear in mind is that when we talk about Chinese music, we're talking about the long, millennial long tradition of Chinese classical music and culture. We're also talking about changes to that happened during the communist revolution and the cultural revolution, which came a little bit later. And for those of you who aren't current on Chinese history, remember that in the 60s, the cultural revolution was designed to reinstill good socialist values in the working in the minds of the intellectual class, especially. And a lot of people were sent to re-education camps where they did manual labor to get in touch with the proletariat in a way that they weren't before, which is why we will see throughout this references to then this happened during the Cultural Revolution. I had a colleague in coursework at Washington University when I was getting my PhD who had grown up in China and then later in Hong Kong. And when asked about her childhood education, she said, well, all of those videos of the little girls dressed in matching uniforms waving flags for the chairman's birthday, that was me. That's what we did in school. So it's kind of an interesting take, and that's why there's often this reference throughout the chapter on Cultural Revolution before, Cultural Revolution after, and how things were affected by the relationship with it. Another thing that we see here again is both Confucian and Buddhist religious meaning assigned to the music, and there is a certain amount of at least philosophical synchronicity, it seems, in China between these two different intellectual traditions. We're still monophonic and heterophonic. Homophony really is a Western European thing, and people who base their music on Western European music use homophony. Most of the rest of the world doesn't so much, and variation form is an important thing. We also get another competing philosophy of Taoism, and we find a lot of the balance between yin and yang, this and that's part of Taoist thought. We find a lot of that balance in the music. And then, of course, we also have to create a place intellectually and musically for Confucianism. And here we have a distinction between art music and entertainment music, and that's something that is fairly universal throughout the world. One of the things I want to talk about in the theory, one, we're not going to go into exacting and detailed looks at the theoretical structures, but of the pentatonic modes, they point that there are symbolisms that are related to each of the modes, directions, political meanings, virtues, colors, elements. There's all this implied by that. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, it's always hard for me to hear that because I don't know that. But if you think about it in terms of songs that you recognize, if you're watching a movie and it's about America in the mid-19th century, and you hear Yankee Doodle or you hear Dixie, you immediately know which side they're talking about. If you hear Dixie, they're talking about the South. You hear Yankee Doodle, they're talking about the North, even though Dixie was a popular song all over the country, as was Yankee Doodle. Another thing that I hope you will notice as we go through this is that a lot of the chordophones, especially the chordophones, in China resemble those in Japan. And you'll also see that this kind of zither construction is very, very common throughout the world. The other thing that's interesting that we find are the bowed lutes, where the bow goes between the strings. And the strings are not manipulated on a fretboard, but they're manipulated kind of out in the air. So if you think back to the African bow harps or to the berimbau or those instruments where you're not stopping the string by pressing it against a fretboard, that's something quite different. And of course, we also have yet another version of a hammered zither or hammered dulcimer. So it looks a lot like a cimbalom, only not quite. I encourage you to spend a couple minutes watching the video of the guy with the DZ. He's really fun. He has a lot of videos, and I think he does a good job of explaining things. And then the Sheng, it's kind of a, I don't know, you can think of it as a harmonica with keys. You can think of it as a mouth-blown accordion, but it's clearly a 20th century kind of instrument, not an older instrument than that. And then we'll also find a wide variety of idiophones throughout. So here's another kind of look at the subtlety. If you'll notice at the bottom of the slide, it says it begins with an introduction, setting the mode for the performance. And again, this is something that we're probably not going to be that sensitive to. This graph is either very useful to you or not very useful to you. I don't find them to be particularly enlightening, but you can follow it if you like. The silk bamboo ensembles, I think, are fascinating because they're this kind of fusion of folk and classical elements, and it's music that's used for personal entertainment. It's something you do in your home. So think Jane Austen, think of the sisters performing for the Bows, and that's exactly what this is. It's music in the home. It's domestic. Reform music during the Revolution, there was a whole movement toward state-governed socialist realist music. And then after that period ended, after the death of Chairman Mao, there was kind of an explosion of different things. The last thing I want to talk about here is dramatic music and opera. The Beijing opera and other forms of opera, I think you're going to see if you look at these clips or find clips and then go to look at the Japanese opera performances, you're going to think that they're very, very similar. And in fact, they are. And then we have this fusion of pop music, K-pop, J-pop, and traditional Chinese instruments with the 12 Girls Ensemble. And there's a click to them there. So that's a quick look at China, and I will talk to you all later.